Na pore päivi, ai ne tuunai, mon saavan tuinna, puolella puures.
Samis exist, but some people seem to think that we are assimilated and we don't exist as an own people anymore. Someone has to show the world that the Sami exist.
The identity of being a Sami person is very complicated because we have so much history that's negative, history where we weren't allowed to speak Sami, and when your language disappears, a lot of identity disappears with it.
I think there's parallel narratives. We have this traditional culture, and then we have this modernity, and they exist alongside one another, but they also can be continuous in a way.
We don't like to be objectified. We don't like to be tourist attractions. We don't like to be exotic. We want to be considered normal people.
It's good to show the political statement that they are not satisfied with the government. So it's very good to fight back and not just lying down and die.
The war against the earth continues, it's intensified. I mean, it almost seems like the human race is on a suicide course. That's why I believe that the indigenous way of being could very well be our survival as a species.
Manko ka kierata autal pisan.
There's a humanity to being of an indigenous people. It's not just a statistical thing. It's not just your bloodlines or the name that you can trace in some kind of a history book. It's knowing that you were part of a group that was small in number or marginalized for whatever reason, yet that this group had a culture. They were people who had a way of life.
Indigenous people have always struggled not just to represent themselves, but be themselves and to be accepted for who they are.
In the Sámi, they've been recognized as an indigenous people too. In fact, the only still surviving indigenous group in Europe.
You have reindeer Sámi, you have river Sámi, so many different kinds. But at the end of the day, they're all one group of people. And they live in one certain region, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia, and in that area, but also in America.
Color of one's skin is always a pre-marker. And when the Sámi first started to come into the UN system, they were probably seen as spies. This is a white-faced person who comes and claims that they are indigenous, but can we really trust these people? A lot of distrust. But there was one person, one Sámi, Ailo should be called. He was a Sámi artist who was very great with yoik. And he went on the stage and he proved that this is the Sámi. This is our culture, this is what we do. And took one of his greatest yoiks on the stage. And you saw suddenly that was a shift of acceptance.
When we start looking at indigenous peoples' philosophies all over the world, there is this sort of connection. It's not to say that there's this oneness, that there's this pan-indigenous, monocultural. They can be very different, but there is, you see these threads that are really interesting.
There is a definite commonality that we've come to call indigenous. And indigenous just means native to a place. It means the first people. And it gets a little confusing because people have always been moving around for various reasons. They might be nomadic. They might have been pushed out from one place and relocated somewhere else. But Indigenous or native as a concept really has to do with living in harmony, how you're living on the earth, whether you feel connected or disconnected.
You have to remember that we were here before the borders, and that has had a deep impact on us.
Well, the main thing is that as a people, we unite across borders. We have more in common in 4 countries than we have in common with the neighbor society.
The fact was they just came up here to a Sámi land, and we didn't have courts, we didn't have police officers, we didn't have official papers. They come to another person's country and make their own papers and say, now this is mine. It's just stealing. If I come into your house with a paper that's saying that this is my house, it's still not my house. That's basically what they did. They overruled everything. They took it.
It's always a struggle because you're belonging to the minority. The majority group don't realize, they don't see how many challenges you have in the daily life just to maintain your own language and your own culture.
After a long time struggle in the 70s and the 80s, it was a big Sami movement, and the outcome of that was the Sami Parliament. The Sami Parliament is the voice of the Sami people towards the government. There are 3 Sami parliaments, one in Sweden, Finland and Norway also, and they have a council. And we have also in Russia, but they have not an own Sami parliament. They have an organization. So we work cross-borderly also with the big questions that concerns all the Sami in all the countries.
At the moment, the Sami Parliament doesn't really have any rights to make decisions at all. It's just a parliament where they can give the tips to the government. But I would really like to see the Sami Parliament getting more rights to make decisions that are important for the Sami community, Sami language and culture.
I hope the young people also start to wear gaktis, that they see new ways of bringing the Sápmi culture further, because we cannot live in 1850.
There are definite cases of racism that do exist. There are certain situations that have occurred in the past where someone has tried to light a girl's jacket on fire because she was Sámi. I would say that the current situation for Sámi people is very positive right now, but there are certain instances that can occur with certain individuals.
Only 15 years ago, when I put on the gakti, then I would get beaten up if I go to a Norwegian city or some place where I was the only one. If you go to a party or a pub in the big Norwegian cities here, I knew I was going to be beaten up, but I never raised my fist. I'm still alive, but that was regular and common.
Survival is a form of resistance. Because what does that mean? Survival is a form of resistance. Well, if the people opposing you want you to be dead, just being alive is a form of resistance. It's saying, no, I'm not going to die. I know you want me, you want my culture, you want my identity to disappear, but I refuse. I'm going to be visible, and I'm going to live, and that in itself is a political act.
We have survived. We're still here. I think that that's one of the most important things that Native storytellers, Native authors, and Indigenous all over the world, what they're trying to convey consistently is that, no, we are not dying. We are still here. And we will go on.
Storytelling has always been very strong among the Sámi people. And also yoik, the traditional chanting. Yoik is not only music, it's a way of communicating. It's a way of communicating with the nature. It is a way of communicating with the one you are yoiking.
It's wrong to say I yoik about. I yoik you. It's a feeling that goes from heart to heart. because I describe you with the tones, with the rhythms, how you are when we're talking about person yoiks. We have yoiks for animals, reindeers, wolf. It is our musical language. It's important to have your language to communicate.
In my opinion, language is the root to keeping a culture alive. If you don't have the language, then there's a lot of things that you will lose inside of the culture.
The Sámi language is very rich. There are so many words that don't exist in Norwegian or English in that case.
But you have lots of small items going parallelly to language. You have those items like twitchy. When you make a knife, you can put your cultural identity into it. When you make your costume, when you make your belt, you can put your identity into that. But it's hard for those who today understand, why didn't he teach me his mother tongue? Why didn't he do that? Because they were living or growing up in a time when the harsh Norwegianation was suppressed on the people in the area. It's not only the language loss, it's all the cultural loss you suffer.
Ja tällä patsien syöttäjä ja äiki, ahte poli kiellä lahka, ahte eilan lohpi kiavatti sääneen kiellä uahvatissa skuulissa.
That situation actually, formally and legally, existed for 60, 70 years.
To walk in a schoolroom when you are 6 years old and told that God doesn't understand Sami language, that Sami language is bad for the brain, and the teacher's hitting you if you speak Sami at school. The atrocities.
The suppression of that identity was so intense. It was a cultural genocide. You were not going to make it in Norwegian culture or in Swedish culture if you said you were Sami, unless you were going to live off of handicrafts and sell stuff to tourists. It was like a do or die. Become Scandinavian or die.
Uksetsi internati, miehtää talvi Sámi, rittu miehtää ja maitteet ehkä kärsokki kuitenkin. Ahte uappat jäji, kädetse tarkielaka, taatsaat, norkalatset, takkalikin perre kiavati tarkiela uappat.
It started in 1850. The Parliament of Norway decided that the frontline soldiers of this battle are not the ones with the weapons, but the teachers. The teachers are our soldiers, and the enemy is everyone who doesn't speak Norwegian.
I think most Norwegians aren't even aware of what kind of pain the Norwegian government and its policies have inflicted to my great-grandparents and grandparents. I often compare it as when I moose hunt. I shoot the moose in the lungs, but it still runs 200-300 meters before it dies. They have stabbed us in the heart and we need help to survive. And just to highlight what they have done to us.
Growing up in America, I'm going to speak from my perspective, what I have seen when I was a student. And I would say the education is crap. It does not go into detail, it does not show the real history that has happened to Indigenous people. It shows it from the government perspective. And that's why it's so important for the Indigenous people themselves to say their history, so we can hear really what had happened.
Many times, our history in the history books and in the movies and all these outside of school activities, it's an incomplete but dominant story.
Very much of the people in Sweden doesn't know about Sami culture or life because they're very bad at it to inform at schools. They teach more about Native Americans or Inuits in Greenland. So that's one problem, that they forget their own indigenous people. Reindeer is quite a very big symbol for the Sami people because you get the food, you get the clothes, the handcraft, So it's a very central animal in the culture.
Among Sami people, having reindeer or not having reindeer doesn't matter. They're still Sami.
Mikidala huitiasalas luossabeutu, miehtästämme ja vähäs janatvallu agriculture. Tammilla huitiasalas maittais mikida. Teillä atte kulttuuri, luossabeutu kulttuuri ja miehtästämme. La hui pueris ja ianas talvi saamikielakat. Kieht kullet teistä Finnmarkui. Ellet tämän kulttuurissa. Ja patsotuellilla unna unnihlous minoriteetta tuossa 60%.
There is probably a view of Samis that we are living on the mountain and we have a reindeer and we are skiing all the days. But that's not the whole picture.
There are places in the south where they truly believe we still live in a lavu, and we still, all we do is herd reindeer and wear gakti and yoik, and they don't see us as modern people at all.
The lavu is actually it's a tent that from an outsider's point of view would look very similar to a teepee. Lavus are still used for camping. They're still used as part of the reindeer herd in Sápmi, but it's used more now as a camping tent.
Yeah, the postcard pictures, the stereotypical Samis in beautiful costumes with the reindeers. And of course, that is still a part of the Sami culture, and some people are living the traditional lives, which is great. But a big part of the Sami people are not living the traditional lives anymore.
We are indigenous people and we are from the Stone Age, but still we are using Facebook, Twitter and all the other social medias. I mean, we are part of a modern society.
Every people have the right to be their own people. They shouldn't be anybody else because some other people say so. It's like saying that if some Native American moves to a city and lives there for a time, then he's Americanized and he's no longer Native American. It's a stupid thing to say.
Then, after the Second World War, during the 1950s, the political situation changed. The Norwegian authorities became more and more aware that children should learn to read and write, at least in their own language.
It's like a new wave coming. Now they've given us opportunity to learn Sámi again, but with the other hand, they close down our areas and the nature. So with one hand, give some small cookies and then take all the cake with the other hand.
So the Sámi people have been fighting mining companies, they've been fighting hydroelectric dams, they've been fighting clear-cut logging, the extinction of species, climate change, everything.
We are so deeply connected to these lands. When you see old forests that our grandfather are telling histories about, and then you see it disappear, it's like burning a library.
It's a new colonization all around the world. It's the rainforests, it's the tar sand in Canada, it's here, the mining business. It takes huge amounts of areas because of making money.
They're opposing a huge iron ore mine right now. It's going to be located just not far from Jokkmokk.
This mine will be a death row for one of the Sami villages here in Jokkmokk. It's also affecting the nature. I mean, animals who are living there, all that lives in that areas will be destroyed forever.
There already is a huge mine in Kiruna, possibly the largest in the world, and it's an utter disaster. They're going to have to move the entire city of Kiruna, which is no small feat. We're talking about hundreds of buildings, because a fissure is opening up from that mine and the entire city is collapsing into the earth. I mean, I can't think of a better metaphor to what's happening to the earth right now. It's literally crumbling underneath their feet.
Other people again say that we need work, we need jobs and so on, but every mining project in the world, when the mine is empty, then they close down and goes bankrupt, and the waste just lies there and it's destroyed forever. The big money goes to the rich companies in the world. So it's not useful in that way. It's temporary luxury. It's like burning down your house to keep warm.
We don't know how long it will take to take away all the poison that will come up. Maybe forever it will be there. I don't want to come in a situation where the coming generation Samis are facing us who are living now and ask us, why did you don't do anything? You saw this coming, and why didn't you do anything about it? I think that's our generation's duty to stand up for our rights.
That responsibility, I think, indigenous peoples take. Because you see out in the world and around the world now, the places that are protected, they have preserved it to be protectable. The nature there. It's areas where indigenous people live.
I think it's really vital that everyone understands we've got these two different mindsets. Native people have this concept of generations. What that means is that what we do today, how will it affect people 7 generations from now? And colonialism, it's a mindset that I would say is alienated from the natural world, from a natural way of living. It sees the earth as a dead thing, devoid of spirit.
Because the landscape is kind of sacred. You know, it's like when you come in, it's like taking in, you know, Mother Earth and you just gouging it out, you know, and this is like where our spirits live. This is where our memories are. It's like a physical reaction to that.
I mean, the lands, it's telling our history, it's where we are living now, and it's also part of our future. I mean, without those lands, we wouldn't exist.
History is about making connections, knowing the history of your oppressor, but also the history of your own people. And once you know how people resisted in the past, it can give you a model for how to resist today. All of that is just a part of education and taking back the power that was taken away from us. It's about reclaiming.
In this part of the world, we are very, very lucky. It's not war and violence. So we have been able to fight democratically and with free speech. And that has been, of course, a big, big, big advantage. If we are to succeed, we have to work together with people and not against people. That's alpha omega. It's like going to a fight alone against 50 people. You won't survive with fists. But if you speak to them and get friends, then it's very much possible that you get some help.
I think there definitely is a relationship between the Sami indigenous movements and other indigenous movements on a worldwide level. Are issues that are a lot the same: loss of language, loss of traditional religion, mining issues, various environmental issues. So I think it's really important that we do connect with one another as indigenous groups.
We're fighting a common enemy. These mining companies, these oil companies, these fracking companies, they're international. They're working all over the world. If colonialism is international, then the indigenous movement also needs to be international.
I think there's a bright light at the end of the tunnel here for Native people. And I'm proud that the Sámi people are taking a leading role internationally.
I think that indigenous people are going to emerge as the leaders. They're holding on to this ancient knowledge of how we should treat the land, how we should be on the land. So I think it's important to listen to their stories.
Spread the knowledge. It's good for everybody. And it's also the diversity of our earth, the cultures and the indigenous cultures. It's enriching everybody.
I think we have to start with asking, why are we consuming so much? We live in a society where everything had to be brand new. Of course, there's been more and more people recycling, but still, it's cooler to have a new iPhone than to have an old phone. You have to ask yourself, do I want to have a future when we all know that the earth cannot produce all our things that we need? Do we want to be part of it?
Indigenous people are kind of like the canaries in the coal mine. They're saying, look, we're on a collision course here. We're getting ready to go over the cliff as a species. And if we don't wake up and start changing the way we live, we're simply going to go extinct. The Creator put us here, but the Creator can take us away.
It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter if you're Sámi or you come from Australia, Japan, or wherever. The most important thing, I think, in the future must go to all people. Your identity must be to be a good person.
My hope for people generally is that people should be able to live as themselves. You should respect your neighbor and let them be who they are.